The school year is back in full swing, and Janae, that can only mean one thing.
College football is back, baby, which means our Red Zone to End Zone team will continue to work hard to provide you the latest college football news and updates throughout the season. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Brandon Williams. We are geared up for another exciting season, but before we start talking about the team talent, I think Janae has some predictions.
Don't get too excited. One of the things I love about college football is how unpredictable it is. And let me just start by saying week one will be one to remember. You have Alabama and FSU squaring off in Atlanta in what many believe could be the prelude to this year's championship.
A popular opinion is these two teams will see each other in a championship game, but I won't say these are the two teams that I have going to a championship game. I need at least 6 weeks to say who will go.
I won't comment on the championship just yet, but here's an interesting stat for you. Brandon, do you know who holds the longest opening game win streak?
The Florida Gators.
The Florida Gators. And they are playing the Michigan Wolverines in Texas, who destroyed them during the 2016 Citrus Bowl by 41-7. They just might put an end to that streak, but I do like how Mac is starting to step things up a bit in the season opener.
Well, I think the more important question is, do you know what colors you'll be wearing at the end of the season when you lose our College Pick'em Challenge?
Orange and blue, because I'm not going to lose.
I think you mean garnet and gold.
The season hasn't even started, and the trash talking has already begun. Brandon is referring to an annual bet we make, and you can be a part of it too. Just sign up for our ESPN College Pick'em Challenge.
You can download the ESPN Fantasy app and register for Red Zone and End Zone group within the College Pick'em Challenge. Every week, you'll be assigned to pick the winner of 10 games they provide. You get a point for every correct answer, and if you are the victor at the end of the season, we will give you $30 cash.
As for Brandon, whoever loses will be forced to go out into the Plaza of the Americas sporting some hideous Seminole attire, where the loser will be harassed by fellow students. But if you need some help making those picks, we've got you covered with our weekly college football previews every Friday evening. But for now, we're about to give you a preview of the top 20 going into the 2017 season.
And here's a quick piece of advice. Steer clear of Janae's picks.
Several years ago, the SEC used to be the conference that dominated football, but as week one enters, only one SEC team is represented in the top 10, and it comes as no surprise that the glory belongs to Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide.
For the first time since 2002, the SEC only had one team that finished in the top 10. They peaked in 2012 when they secured 5 of the top 10 spots, but since then, the conference has been on a downward decline, and Alabama continues to dominate with a whole 10 national titles.
10, that would be nothing if we were counting pre-1935, just shortly after the AP poll was invented. Fun fact for you, Princeton and Yale would put Bama to shame with their 28 and 27 national championships respectively.
And now the recruiting programs are non-existent and reserved for only the brightest student athletes.
I'd have to disagree with you. They have recruiting programs. They just don't allow their athletes to enter through a special admissions process like majority of the colleges. In fact, Alabama quarterback Josh Rosen recently posted the question, how would athletic programs be affected if the SAT requirements were raised for student athletes? It would dramatically change the face of today's top athletic programs.
Well, you shouldn't have to worry about that happening anytime soon. But not only is Bama first according to AP poll, to no surprise, it's also back on top in terms of recruiting class.
In fact, it's been 10 years since a team topped Alabama's 5,389 points in the Scout Top 25 ranking system, which was the Florida Gators in 2007. But Brandon, what kind of talent is migrating to Tuscaloosa?
The Crimson Tide welcomed 25 new commits this season, with 10 of them being in the top 100, including the top running back prospect from California, Najee Harris, who had 2,774 rushing yards in his senior season and 94 rushing touchdowns for his entire high school career. They seem to be bringing in quite the mix with 2 receivers, another quarterback, and some offensive defensive linemen.
And in terms of coaching staff, it looks like Nick Saban is determined to eliminate the drama surrounding the offensive coordinator position, snatching Brian DeBall from the New England Patriots following the departure of Lane Kiffin and the one-and-done run of Steve Sarkisian.
Despite his experience in the pros, it's his job to keep up with a team that averages more than 450 yards a game and 39 points per game. That is not going to be a very easy task.
Luckily, he's got enough talent to work with as Bama sees the return of quarterback Jalen Hurts, who can make huge running plays when he needs to, but is working more on airing out the ball.
And Bama still has Bo Scarborough and Damian Harris in the backfield with a wide receiver core featuring 5-star talent like Calvin Ridley, all of who should take some pressure off of Hurts.
Defensively, the Tide was ranked second for overall defense and first when it came to rushing and scoring. But they are losing 5 of the top pass rushers to the NFL, who, when combined, totaled 38 of last season's 54 sacks.
The money question is, will the Tide make it to the championship game for the 3rd year in a row?
If Hurts can get the offense going against FSU, then the Tide will be in pretty good shape. But looking at last year, his completion percentage only dropped below 60% against the strong defenses of USC, LSU, Florida, Washington, and Clemson, throwing 13 for 31 on the way to defeat in the championship game. The Seminole defense would fall under this category and could shake, rattle, and roll one of the top offenses in college football.
I believe that the Crimson Tide will roll into the championship once again and will be shocked to see them unable to do so.
Well, the other team based from Alabama is the second-ranked SEC team, who, despite making it to the Sugar Bowl last year, had an awful season.
Well, there is a term known as offensive balance, but here's a team that serves as an extreme to that. The Auburn Tigers were explosive, running the ball, earning themselves the 6th best rushing offense, but quarterback Shaun White struggled significantly when it came to passing the ball.
And just how real was the struggle, Brandon?
Well, when you start every single game, and you can't manage to pass for more than 1,700 yards in a season, that classifies as a whole new level of bad.
8-5 was certainly not the season they had planned for last year, but even though Shaun White is back, the new kid from Baylor may shake things up for this offense, who ranked 117th in the passing game.
Jarrett Stidham is certainly more aware of what play options he has, and Auburn only lost 1 wide receiver, so he is now in full control of the offense. Granted, Tony Stevens was the top wide receiver, but they have 4 other sets of hands that are more capable, boosting offensive productivity this year.
Well, they've still got Cameron Petaway Jr., who had more than 1,200 receiving yards last season, and that was with missing 3 games due to an injury. As long as offensive productivity is boosted just a tad, which should be easy with Stidham in the mix, the Tigers should fare much better this season.
One thing about the Auburn defense is they are stellar when it comes to preventing to run the ball.
Well, when that's all they get to practice against, it kind of makes sense. Maybe now they can improve their passing coverage since they will have a bit more exposure to it at practice.
Pass rusher Carl Lawson has moved on and was responsible for 14 tackles for loss. Overall, though, I think Auburn has a chance to give Alabama a run for their money, but the smartest thing to do is never bet against the Crimson Tide, so they should be second in the SEC West. Nothing worse than a Saturday night in Death Valley, because you probably won't make it out with the W.
Actually, a date with Nick Saban would be worse, and don't worry, LSU has him penciled in already for Week 9. But what you are referring to is the fact that LSU plays a strong game at home when it's after 7. However, if you take the winning percentages of all the SEC teams for night games played at home since 2005, Alabama is actually more successful than LSU, winning more than 92% of the time. LSU comes in second, but they also play a lot more night games than the average team.
Well, the Tigers head into Week 1 ranked 13. The offense loses 5 of their top 6 wide receivers, seeing the return of DJ Clark, who only mustered up 466 receiving yards last season. So that will hurt them already with a mediocre aerial game they had.
But the Tigers have snatched up Matt Canada from Pitt, who was responsible for building an offense that was able to outdo Clemson's and the Big Ten champ Penn State. He may not figure it out this season, but he will definitely be able to mold this offense in the next 3 years.
Until then, the Tigers will rely on the running ball. Darius Geis proved more effective than Leonard Fournette last season after rushing for nearly 1,400 yards and claiming 15 touchdowns. Now that Fournette is out of the picture, this is his swamp now.
And oddly enough, he even made a few big receiving plays last year. He had a 29-yard catch against Florida. It's not usual that we see a running back attempt to create big passing plays, so I think there's options there as well. But his bread and butter is in penetrating the gaps that the offensive line creates for him.
As strong as the run game is, guys can't do it all either. So one way or another, Danny Etling will have to try and develop some sort of passing game early on to prepare for some tough, rough defenses they will face later in the season, like Alabama and Auburn.
Speaking of defense, LSU's defense was top-notch last year, finishing 10th in the nation. It, too, is losing quite a few key players. They will be down their top 6 tacklers, safety Jamal Adams, and 2 key linebackers. But they do have one secret weapon, Arden Key.
Key is returning from personal leave during the offseason and has the potential to be a quarterback's worst nightmare. With 13 sacks last season, along with 3 forced fumbles, he could have another decent season.
As long as the defense can continue to hold up opposing offenses, LSU should finish the regular season with a 9-3 record.
LSU will most likely finish third in the SEC West behind the Crimson Tide and the Auburn Tigers.
Georgia winning the SEC East? That seems to be a popular speculation heading into the season, but I reached out on Twitter to see who our viewers think has the best shot in earning a trip to Atlanta, and here are the responses.
3 of Georgia's 4 regular season losses in 2016 were to SEC East teams. Part of the problem was the offense, who did not do too hot last season and gradually moved down the ranks to 87th overall.
Jacob Eason threw for 2,430 yards, but he has already shown more poise in the offseason, so I think his performance will improve, but he will be missing his favorite target, Isaiah McKenzie.
In terms of offense, the backfield should be stacked as Nick Chubb and Sony Michel return for another round, but offensively, productivity will ultimately lie on the offensive line and wide receivers. The run game failed to take off like it should have last year due to poor blocking for the line of scrimmage, but if they can clean that up, they should have a better season.
If offense struggles, they can fall back on their top 20 defense, which only allowed 327 yards a game.
Since the 2 outside linebackers decided to pass on entering this year's draft, the Bulldogs lose only one starter, Maurice Smith. So even if the offense doesn't improve too much, you can still count on a stellar defensive performance.
Despite a struggling secondary last year, it is sure to improve now that the 2015 first-team All-SEC pick Dominique Sanders is back in the mix.
And they had the second strongest recruiting game this year, according to Scouts Top 25, welcoming 7 4-star recruits and the 5-star safety, D'Angelo Gibbs, who will be competing for the time with the seniors.
The Bulldogs will have a better season for sure, but an SEC East title, I don't see that happening just yet.
But if the defense remains strong and the offense is able to improve by even a little, you could very well be contending for their first SEC East title in 5 years. For now, the Gators get to claim that title after 2 consecutive trips to SEC conference game, which we won't discuss.
For now, Gator fans are still anxiously waiting for Jim McElwain to announce the starting quarterback. Who's it going to be? Will he go with Del Rio again, or has the progress of Franks and Trask drawn attention to a younger quarterback? Then you have the true freshman Jake Allen, or the Notre Dame transfer Malik Zaire. Surely one of those can be an effective quarterback for a struggling offense like the Florida Gators.
Well, they were able to earn themselves a rank of 10 by Scout for the recruiting this year, scooping up 5-star recruit Jake Allen. So recruiting-wise, it's one of the better years the Gators have seen since 2007. But as McElwain enters his 3rd year with 2 SEC East titles in the bag, he is looking to go farther than that. Janae, I know there's something more to say about the quarterback race.
Of course I do. Why put in Appleby after Del Rio injured himself? At that point, the season did not really matter, so pull a red shirt and get him some reps in. Mac has got a lot of talent to shape his offense around, but no one who has quality experience in college, the days of sitting back and watching the defense do all the work could very well be over.
Who do you want to see start?
Quite honestly, go with Zaire. At least he has some experience. Neither Franks nor Trask did that great in the orange and blue game and leading up to the preseason.
If I were Mac, I would go with Malik Zaire too. I haven't really seen Franks in action, but during the spring game, he missed a slant route that should have been an easy touchdown by overthrowing his target. He may have developed a lot since then, but let's just say, whoever it is, I expect a lot of improvement from the offensive side of the ball.
Well, if I were Mac, I'd tell Doug Nossmeyer to start getting a passing game together. Since the Tebow era, the Gators have relied on the run, and it hasn't gotten them anywhere. In fact, they've struggled to get more than 2,000 rushing yards in a single season in the last 4 years.
And a majority of offensive mistakes have been corrected by the elite defense, but now the Gators no longer have Tease Tabor, Marcus May, Quincy Wilson, Jared Davis, and Alex Anzalone to create much-needed plays that create more opportunities for the offense.
There is still talent on the defensive side of the ball, the man to watch being Nick Washington, who has shown his willingness to step up in times of need and help lead the team.
The good thing is Florida will face most of the games at home or at a neutral site, but the season opener against Michigan is important. If they win, they can enjoy revenge for the beating they faced in the Citrus Bowl in 2016. Lose, and suddenly they've got a lot of pressure on them. Winning the SEC East is always expected, but can they do better than that?
It's going to come down to being calm and collected. The Gators need to work on effective rushing, finding that quarterback who can run the offense effectively while introducing some passing. And I cannot stress this enough, Florida, you need to reduce the penalties. I have never seen a team so heavily penalized, and last year alone, penalties cost them nearly 800 yards.
I see the Gators as a team who will represent the SEC East in the SEC Championship game and be highly rated enough to play in a New Year's Six Bowl or a top-tier bowl game like the Citrus. The Gators have some heavy program names on their list like Tennessee and Texas A&M that have been in decline and in a shadow of their former selves. Their schedule isn't nearly as difficult as it looks and would need to pull 3 upsets against Georgia, Florida State, and Alabama in order to show up to the playoffs. I don't really see that happening. Well, that concludes our show for the AP Top 20.
Don't forget to tune in next week. We'll be covering your Week 1 college football preview featuring the best games of the week. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at BJ_RedZone, where we'll have all the updates and game coverage. Have a good night.